Hi, everyone. It's Chemere, and I am going to lead you through today's session. And Raphael already kind of previewed what it is, but we're in Module 1, an AI transformation journey. And we're going to go through session 2 today, which is shifting to the next step in the AI transformation journey. All right, so here's the agenda for today. We're going to discuss the 4 phases of maturity in more detail, and we will discuss some steps to get you set up for success with AI in your organization. And then I'll talk to you about what you can expect for the next week. Over the hour, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat or the Q&A box, and one of the team will answer, or I will answer the question live. All right, so just a reminder that, this is the second session of Module 1. And, I just want to talk about a couple of the other things that we're offering as part of this AI Foundations series. After today's session, starting on this will be the first study group that we offer. We're going to offer a study group for each week where we're going to go back over some of the questions you might have from the sessions that you've participated in. Those will be on Saturdays at 7 a.m. Pacific. So it'll start the same time this starts, but it will be for a half hour. And we also have an Ask Me Anything forum, which will be on Sundays, where you can bring any question that you have to the table. And those both will be led by my colleague, Sanyam Bhutani. And I will show you at the end of the session how to access those sessions. You'll go to the same place that you go to for these sessions, but you'll just click in a different space. And then next Monday, we're going to finish out the AI transformation module by presenting a special session with one of our leaders in the healthcare space, where he's going to talk about AI transformation and the response to COVID-19. And then next week, we're going to start module 2, which is demystifying artificial intelligence. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some AI concepts. So if you're interested in seeing the full course schedule, then of course you can look on the training, the AI Foundation site from our training community, and you'll see exactly where we are and where we're going. All right. So over the course of this session, I'm going to actually speak about how organizations mature as they adopt practices that allow for the adoption and use of AI through an organization. But it's important to note that it takes a number of people who play important roles in order for this AI vision to become a reality. So that's why you're here. So as organizations journey through an AI transformation, you as either current or potential AI practitioners or decision makers and executives also make that journey possible. All right, so we're going to review the 5 keys to unlock AI value that we discussed in the last session, because these are actually going to be pretty important as we talk about each phase of maturity today. All right, so the first is creating a data culture. This is where you're going to find people on your team, or you're going to staff people on your team that are analytical, they're creative, they really keep data in the forefront. And so these people are going to play a number of roles in your organization. They may be your business leaders, they may be your data scientists or IT partners, other data workers, business analysts, and the list goes on. The second key is to ask the right questions. And I just want to bring bring this point home here, that not every question or use case is actually will benefit from using AI or machine learning. There are other ways to kind of solve some problems, but if you're going to take advantage of AI, you need to make sure that you've got the right business, that you're asking the right question, that you've got the right set of people in the room that can fine tune whatever the final problem is that you're going to solve. And, as Ingrid mentioned before, like, you've got to be specific. You've got to be able to if you're going to solve a problem, you have to be able to supply it with data that will help you try to predict. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be something that you can solve in a specific amount of time. All right. And so the third key is community. And, I would say like the AI community is growing, it's large. There's a lot of really knowledgeable people, and, there's a lot of knowledge sharing going on. So, you're here today. So you're part of an AI community, and, that's a great first step. And, H2O as a company also has, has a large reach and a growing community of experts. So, as you're going along your learning journey, or you're trying to apply some of these things that you hear about today, if you're having issues, then, reach out to us and help, and allow us to help you, either by providing you resources through webinars, or doing a discovery call, or, maybe even partnering you with someone who's been where you are, so that you can kind of learn from what they're doing. We're here to help. The fourth key is thinking through your data and technology considerations. So where's your data? Are you looking for a cloud solution? Where are you going to actually use your AI solution? What data will you use? Really, have you thought about what your business actually needs? And then the last key is learning more about explainable AI. And this one is going to be something that I'll touch on today, and it will be something that we bring up again and again. And then we also have a special module dedicated solely to responsible AI. But basically, you want to make sure that you're creating models that people trust, that your customers trust, that your executives trust, that your data scientists trust. And, if you didn't hear, the common theme is that people are involved in that process. So you need to make sure, again, that you're asking the right questions, both before, during, and after you create a model, and that you're building the right models, and you have the right evaluation criteria in mind. Then that way, that's how you know that you're building trust in your AI solution. All right, so we're going to review one more thing before we get going on the new material. So in the last session, I previewed what the 4 stages of maturity are, basically, for an AI journey. The first is potential. And so that's where an organization might, they have some interest in AI. And so they'll take some steps to kind of evaluate the value, maybe do a proof of concept to get started. And that might involve, outside help, especially if you don't know where to start. In the second phase, it's operational. So there's more focus, there's more structure around AI initiatives. And, there may be multiple groups doing some sort of AI initiative, and it's no central kind of agreement on, what does an organization look like that's trying to do AI. But, the AI projects are being started, they're being completed, and, presented. At the strategic phase, there's an emphasis that's made here to start to create an enterprise strategy around getting the right AI platform, making sure that you've got a centralized AI and data governance strategy, and also a focus on security. All of these are really important considerations, no matter what your role is in this journey. And in the last stage, the data-driven stage, this is the most mature of enterprises. You really start to gain insights from your data, and you've got a really well-developed data architecture. There's going to be widespread adoption and consumption of all of the resources you've put into creating this AI architecture, and then your enterprise actually turns into a leader in your industry, because you're able to take advantage of the capabilities that you've built by, creating a really solid data infrastructure, thinking about, how you're organized, who's part of the team, how you're going to monitor and govern what you're outputting. So we're going to talk about all of those things today. All right. So here, being able to adapt to is pretty much a rapidly changing business environment due to AI availability through technology and applications. You know, there's probably an importance here to deliver some sort of framework for engagement. So if this is the first time you're doing something like this, maybe this is an example of how you might want to approach getting started on your first if you're in the beginning stages, getting started on your first project, or if you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you've never done anything formal, this might be a nice way to formalize things. So, and especially if you're stuck and you're trying to get momentum for your AI projects. So this is an example of how to engage your team with other stakeholders. The first step is to do a data assessment. So you want to look at things like, is where's the data? Is it available? Who has access to it? What is the quality? How secure is it? Or, what are my security concerns? Can we acquire more if we need it? Those are all areas to explore. The second is to conduct use case workshops with AI experts. So, perhaps you don't know where to start. Maybe you can engage with some internal or external consultants or expert vendors to help you start those conversations about how to identify and develop solid use cases that can be undertaken with success within your organization. The third is to take advantage of technology that could speed up time to seeing results in the model development life cycle. So automated machine learning is one of those tools. And as we talk more about specific strategies like how to overcome the talent gap, how to create models at scale, we'll talk more about what automated machine learning is specifically. And just so you know, H2O, I think there was a question the last session, what driverless AI was. We have a couple of products that support automated machine learning, and driverless AI is one of the answers to that. So it's our enterprise automated machine learning platform, which does a lot of that, speeds up the time to develop models and get things into production really easily. And sometimes that is a problem that organizations have to overcome. All right. The fourth step is to have a plan in place to deploy your model. So basically, how are you going to use your model in some sort of product or system? It's not enough to just create it. It's what are you going to do with it afterward? And then the last step for engagement is to measure what the model is doing based on KPIs. So are you looking for the model to save you money, or is it bringing in new revenue? So successful teams are able to get through these stages pretty quickly, which will help to boost confidence in the investment of AI technology and capabilities. So as we talk more today, keep this kind of an engagement framework in mind. All right. So here, I'm just going to point out this illustration are some of the key kind of actions or milestones that take place in an organization that have transformed or will transform into a mature data-driven organization. So the transformation is going to begin with an assessment of where things are. You always want to know where you're starting from, so you know where you're going. And then you want to identify relevant or AI solvable business use cases. Hopefully you're hearing a theme here. And then the next step would be to look at the way your AI teams are structured and, what your technology platform looks like and what you want it to look like. And then the next milestone is to think about how you're going to incorporate responsible AI practices into your governance and risk plans. And then the last is to lead with a strategic vision that has, basically innovation at the heart of it. So here you want to communicate what the vision is to your company. That way you've got people on board, people, are willing to partner and, help deliver on that vision. All right. So I'm just here going to basically just give you a generic description of an AI journey. We talked a lot about different real customer use cases from H2O, and so I'm just going to talk about a, this is a real customer, but it's just anonymized. So this is an example of an organization that was small. Um, but actually grew, and that's not unlike a lot of organizations today, and they grew fast. So this customer is focused on making car buying fair and fun, and they bring together a lot of messy automotive industry data from different sources in different formats, and that is a common um, that's common when you're dealing with data. Sometimes it comes from different, it's disparate, it's something that's messy, and you have to, deal with that in your data science process. Um, and the money they make, so they make their money when cars are bought, and their value is derived from how well they're able to drive the correlations across the data to deliver an interactive customer experience that helps to speed up the time to buy from a customer. So this customer in particular sells data, and so they wanted to make sure that they had a smooth rolling out of an AI analytics architecture before they went public. And so, with the help of us, um, in a short amount of time, they were able to take their vision of getting a data lake and having it transform their business. And so, data lakes are common now when we talk about centralizing access to data, and so and so. At the beginning of the journey for this particular customer, they had limited knowledge of AI. And so for us, we partner with companies to get them trained up, and we work hand in hand to kind of develop an architecture. So we work with the customer to, within their kind of resources, to get them uh, developed quickly and help implement. And so we become partners with them in their success journey. And then the last one before I take questions, um, if I mentioned before that it takes a number of people who have different roles in order to make an AI transformation possible. So this list that you see here, this is not exhaustive. This is, just a list of, maybe some key players that you might see or recognize in, either your company or other companies as you start to read more about what's going on with AI today. So in the business lane here, um, as we talk about all of the different phases, I'm actually going to talk about specifically where some of these roles that you see on the screen here um, make a difference in getting to the next stage. So at certain stages, maybe these roles don't exist, but as you start to mature, your talent in the organization as well. And sometimes these roles are called something completely different. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this as well. So from a business perspective, roles that might be important in the transformation, they might include like a chief experience officer or some other C-suite. Specifically, you might get a chief data officer, or sometimes they're called like a chief digital officer, depending on their skill set. Or you might have a chief information officer. And then you also have lines of business owners. So maybe you're SVP or VP of XYZ. Then in this applications row here, we've got different workers, different data kind of workers that perform different roles. So the people like business analysts, um, developers, data scientists, maybe data engineers, other data workers, those that handle the databases. So there are many, many different roles that kind of play really critical, that are mission critical pretty much for being able to get through this journey. And then from an infrastructure perspective, um, we have people who play the role of like a data architect, maybe a director of security, because as I mentioned before, as you start to go along, you're going to undertake other considerations like security, governance. Your technology teams are going to play with your data teams to make sure that everything is in concert with one another. You might have a platform's operations teams or a DevOps team. And then, of course, you have people who um, work on the databases. And all of these roles are crucial. All right. So I'm going to pause here for questions.
Chemere, there's one question about in that phase, why is there initially a dip, right? And I just responded to that,
Oops,
and
sorry. Let me
if
go
you
back.
go back to the one where you started talking about the customer that journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
That dip that you're seeing there. So we're trying to show value, right? So initially, as folks are working on this data journey, and they're collecting data, they're trying to understand the business problem, they're exploring the data, they're cleaning the data, they're maybe building models, they're getting ready to deploy the models, they're verifying models. All that's a huge investment, can be a big investment by the customer. And so at that point, your AI is giving you maybe no value, right? Or very little value, right? It's not until you get to the point where you've taken that model, you deployed the model, and you integrate it into some business process, and it's starting to actually help you achieve whatever goal, that then that value curve starts kind of going up. Right? Let me see. Can you share how do we engage where customers have pre-existing applications for current business processes and see resistance for some stakeholders?
Um, I'm not sure if you're referring to specific examples, but I'll give an opinion, and then if anyone else on the team wants to give one, then please chime in. So the let me just reread the question here. So how do we engage where customers have pre-existing applications for current business processes? So I would, I'm going to refer back to this engagement cycle here because I think it's pretty clear um, how to undertake a project like an AI project. And I would say whether or not you're the customer or you're working on behalf of another customer, it's always great to be able to have specific things that you're going to focus on. So I mentioned before, data assessment. It's pretty clear what the end goal for that is, to what you're trying to get to. Being able to answer a very specific question. I think that from if you're supporting a customer, once you're able to kind of agree upon what that one thing, and we'll just focus on one application here, but that one thing that it is that you're trying to solve first, then people start to get a level of comfort, because during that process you're going to ask all the right questions to make sure you've under completely understood what they're actually asking for, because sometimes what they're asking for is not what they mean, that you've gotten their kind of a sign off, basically saying, whatever we agree to by the time we finish this conversation is what we both agree to. So you always want to make sure you get that buy-in. And then I'm going to skip well, no, I won't. I'll say, if you're operating on behalf of a customer and you're trying to sell them on the idea of, maybe providing increased efficiencies by using an automated machine learning tool, then you want to be able to provide some either resources or an example, or bring in someone who has been there, and then some, and I've found that that does kind of ease some concerns. And then I would say the other biggest piece is probably dollars and cents will always make sense to other people. So if you can show how something might save somebody X amount of money or make someone X amount of money, they're willing to listen. So I would say, once you kind of have a good solid framework where you can take and it's repeatable, then that's when you start to kind of get past the resistance that people might have. But it's about education, it's about being a good partner, and it's about being able to, adequately spell out the things that you're trying to accomplish and working in collaboration with each other. So I'll pause there and see if anybody else on the team has something else they want to add to that.
I think that's good, Chemere.
All
And there's a
right.
couple more questions, but I think I'm going to try to answer them via the chat.
All right. Thanks. All right. Okay. All right. So now let's talk a little bit more in detail about the first phase. So at this stage, the focus is going to really be on the first application. So the goal here is to validate the value of AI. This pilot project is going to be important because it's probably the one that is meaningful, but it may not be the highest value project. So the goal may be such that you are trying to get your first win where the company recognizes the potential, is comfortable, and it becomes more familiar with AI, and by the end of it will be willing to try more projects. The outcome really should be that the project is not so small that people are just going to like dismiss it, but that it's impactful enough that you start to gain some momentum as you go along. So a couple of, I would say, key considerations at this point would be that, maybe if you're just starting out, you're working with an external AI company like H2O at this point, especially if you don't have the necessary talent or resources or experience, because it'll shorten the time for you to be able to get that first win under your belt. And then, maybe you want to make sure you have a timeline in mind. Any initial project that you do, you don't want it to drag on forever because that doesn't inspire confidence. And then the project has to be something that you can do with technology that's available today. Now, whether you have that technology in house or not is not really you have to deal with that, but you want to make sure that the problem you're solving is not something that's like science fiction or something like that. So you want to tackle realistic AI projects. And then the last one is just being clear on what you're trying to solve. So the problem has to be defined and it should be measurable. And and measurable means that you will be able to see some sort of value. So whatever it is that you kind of whatever that means, whether that's a revenue indicator or, cost savings or, a time savings, et cetera. So it just has to be of value to the business. All right. So let's look at, what an organization might potentially look like from a roles perspective. So, here, maybe you have a line of business leader that kind of knows what you're doing, but, they're not really directly involved in the day-to-day work. But, here, maybe you've got a data scientist and a data engineer working together to kind of get this project off the ground. So, there's a try and see approach. And I would say that this is probably important because investments and resources like time and technology are really expensive. So it may only be a single group that's working on this first initiative. So maybe you are partnering with an external, with some external consultant or external party to help you along with this journey. And so this will probably be a brief undertaking, and this may actually result in some sort of proof of concept. And that'll be dependent upon, your individual circumstances, whatever it means for you to validate the value of AI. And again, you want it to be measurable. So we always want to measure. And so let's see. Sorry. So I'll pause there to see if there are any questions.
So there's a question on what's the difference between a data scientist and a data engineer?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would probably say something wrong here, but as a data scientist is usually focused on the modeling aspect of an AI project or a machine learning project. A data engineer is usually focused on like the data aspect. So, not saying that a data scientist is not dealing with data, but the data engineer will really, in some organizations, focus on the getting the data in the right or obtaining the data, getting the data in the right format, making sure that, whatever like if you're going to put it into a production environment, that the right set of um, considerations are in place to make sure that you're able to pull data from like the source system and still be able to predict in either a batch or a real-time environment. So the data engineer is really focused on like I would say like underneath the hood, and the data scientist is kind of like driving the car basically, when it comes to the machine learning data science process.
Yeah, and this definitely varies by sort of organizations, right? I mean, there's this whole, and we'll probably dive more into the different roles as we kind of continue in this course, right? But so the data scientist is definitely kind of trying to understand the business problem, focus on the AI, analytics, machine learning capabilities, and the data engineer. I mean, as Chemere mentions, like this is all powered by data, so we need to get data, and sometimes that data engineer gets access to the data, does some preparation to kind of feed the data scientists. So there's some data scientists who kind of can go direct. Kind of really depends on the organization, right? But the key thing here is you have someone who has access to data, can help prepare the data, and at the same, and you have someone who's actually trying to figure out the business problem and building potential models.
Thanks.
Probably the last or not another question is while solving a problem, should the end result or win always be tied to money or value?
I think I answered that question, but I'll
Okay.
just reiterate it. It doesn't always have to be a dollar value. I will say time savings is just as important sometimes. And, implicitly, it usually does have some sort of monetary value. But in lots of cases, and I think, we showed that in the first session, lots of the lots of the measurable wins that people get using machine learning or AI come from like a cost savings, or they're able to enter into a new market, which means they can make more money, but that's not always the case.
Sounds good, Shamir.
All right. All right, so let's talk about phase two here. So once you've gotten some momentum, you'll start to do you'll start to operationalize the work that you've done. So here, this is where you might want to consider how to take your new AI or advanced analytic applications and then deploy them for use, because they really don't have any value until you start to actually use them. And so the first group of AI applications that you will that you create are going to help to continue to build that momentum, and which leads to adoption, which leads to further investment in time and resources into creating an AI driven company. So in this phase, we're going to see more objectives and initiatives that actually come into play here. So when we look at, who might be involved in this stage, and keep in mind that these roles may look different in other organizations, they might have different titles, maybe they play slightly different roles, or have different responsibilities. But I'll just talk in general. So in the operational phase, we see here that, we've got one project and then we've got project N. So we could have a number of different projects going on in different lines of business that are, machine learning or AI focused. And so we've got decision makers that, now they've got a vested interest. There's some leadership there. You've got your data scientists and data engineers that are, going along about their work. Here you might have you might also create a model operations team, which, and utilize a set of maybe model operations tools or some sort of framework that is going to actually help with the considerations you have to deal with once you create and use an AI model. So you'll answer questions like how and where do you deploy it, how do you what's your review process of the model to make sure it's still useful over time, or when does it need to be replaced. And I have a little note down here that we have a whole uh, sorry about that. We have a whole module that is dedicated to model ops. I actually think it's module 7 and not module 6. So forgive me for that. And so here, we're starting to create some discipline around what we're doing, but that doesn't mean that, there's a central kind of agreement on what that is. Additionally, you might have an application developer. So, data scientists and data engineers are not necessarily application developers. So you may take the work that the model that's created, and maybe an application developer will help infuse that into whatever the end state is going to be. Okay. Well, that was it for that one. So any questions here?
So Chemere, there's a question around the maturity at each phase that's needed, and can you please sort of let us know how we can gain those maturities from a beginner level? And I think a big part of how we design this AI foundation course and how we design the ML foundation course is really to kind of give you those foundation capabilities and kind of on ramp you from almost starting to kind of really taking that next step in that journey, right? So we designed this course and series, and it's, I don't think it's one talk, right? That's why this is a course that's going to go on for weeks, both the AI foundation and the machine learning foundations. And we try to do that. There's courses, there's hands-on, there's study sessions, and the hands-on are going to get more and more technical as we kind of go in this journey.
Thanks, Raphael. And I think I'll just add that these things do take time. I think what we're doing is providing we're trying to answer some questions that are commonly asked, or problems that people run up against, so that you reduce the time that it takes for you to get up to speed, but you're still learning along the way. A journey is essentially something that takes time. So I would say that, over the course of the next few weeks, especially for the AI foundations, if you're a beginner, then, it's good to understand concepts. It's never really good to go in heads first without kind of understanding what you're doing. And so that's the reason why this AI foundations course has kind of stood up. For those of you who, really want to dive into the mechanics, or like the application of some of these concepts, then yes, machine learning foundations will, again, even if you're a beginner, it's really designed for beginners, but you'll get some hands-on experience. You'll understand how to work through some of these considerations, and you'll start to see how these things fit within the maturity journey, despite what your role actually is. So thank you for that question. And, thanks, Raphael, for kind of teeing that up. I do think it's important to kind of understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and, how do you kind of benefit from this? So there we go. All right. So I'm going to move on to this next phase. And this is where we start to talk more about how things really kind of kick how we really kick things up a bit. So here is, this strategic stage is kind of where, you may start to see restructuring or new teams being formed that are going to handle all of these new capabilities that are kind of unleashed by using AI. So you're going to see scalable platforms being developed and a central governance strategy around your AI, your data governance, and security. Um, so I'm going to make a quick callback to what we talked about in the last session, because I do think this is important. Um, that there are a number of different ways that organizations can be organized, and then this is not the only way, but these are common ones. So a centralized organization is like this hub and spoke wheel type model, and so the data science teams are going to do the analytics for multiple business units. We've got a decentralized organization. That's where, each line of business kind of has its own data science or AI capabilities. And then you've got this hybrid organization where there's a centralized AI team, but each business unit also has its own capabilities. There are positives and negatives to many of these, but what we're seeing a lot of these days are customers creating like these AI innovation labs or centers of excellence that allow for the business to kind of react quickly to new opportunities. So you can leverage the domain knowledge, the analytics capabilities, and do some knowledge sharing, because there's a close proximity to the lines of business with the lines of business to the AI teams. And so the use cases originate in the lines of business, and you can work more cross-functionally. These teams are also likely to have access to like the central data lakes, and they're important in formalizing and executing on the strategic processes. So kind of keep that in mind as we talk about what a team might look like. I'm also going to make another call back to the ecosystem choice slide that we talked about the last time. There are so many technologies out there, and in the strategic phase, you're focused on creating a platform that takes a lot of things into consideration. And so you want to be so this here is kind of taking that really busy kind of ecosystem, and it's organizing things in a way where this might be a way that you start to ask questions. So what do we actually need? So you've got your cloud services here, you've got your databases, you've got your programming, excuse me, if you're doing big data, then maybe you want to take advantage of distributed computing. So you've got those types of technologies, your open source or other programming languages to be able to access the data. You also have your business intelligence tools, which play a really critical role a lot of times in getting quick understanding of your data in the forms of like of descriptive statistics or dashboarding. And then you've got your advanced analytic platforms. So this is where these are the types of platforms that you would use to do your machine learning. So here is, if you were to think about this from a point of view where you're creating a platform, you want to take into consideration, what do I actually need? Think and being future minded, what do we want to support, or what can we support, or what should we support in the future? So a lot of that is having conversations with the lines of business, getting a really good set of use cases, et cetera, and then taking all of that into consideration to figure out what type of tech you'll need. So from a strategic point of view, when we talk about the key players, now you see there's a lot more involved here, and then there's a lot more organization. So what we're seeing in here is that we've got business units that are that have a number of different roles kind of contributing to this AI effort. So you may have your business analysts here, you may have a business intelligence team. So this group may be doing more of the descriptive dashboarding type work using a tool like Tableau or, Power BI. You might see an application developer lead. So I talked about application developers the last time, but you might have someone who's taken the central responsibility for this business unit to make sure that the applications are sound and that everything kind of works as it's intended to do. Here you might also see an enterprise data science team. So sometimes so if we call back to the way that organizations are organized, an enterprise data science team kind of is cross-functional a little bit. So they're able to kind of be close to the lines of business, and they are operating on like an organization-wide strategy. Here you might have a governance group that is specific to this business unit. And then also, you might see, an IT leader that becomes an integral part of what you're doing. And, that also brings into, and we still have our data engineers and our model ops groups, but we also might have a data architect. And so, and that person is going to help fortify some of the data systems in play. So, not every organization has a data architect. Maybe not every organization needs one, but these are roles that you will see out there, if you're doing searches. And
Can I add to this a little bit?
sure.
So part of this is as you scale what you're trying to do with your AI initiatives, you're going to have to start, and really this is a shift from sort of maybe a department level AI effort, or a shift from sort of an innovation lab to kind of an enterprise view. And as you kind of go into that enterprise view, it's not just your application within your division. Now you're starting to look at your application across the enterprise. And as you're trying to look at analytics across the enterprise, maybe your AI effort is going to have to start integrating with that sort of BI team, right? And so that's the major shift from 2 to 3. Is that now as you're going to kind of go more enterprise wide, you're going to have to start integrating with all these sort of enterprise wide analytics teams.
All right. Thanks, Raphael. All right. Let's see. So as Raphael mentioned here, now we're talking about a lot of key talent, and we're making sure that we're getting to an enterprise view of things. So oh, sorry about that. Let me go back. There we go. So oh yeah, I'm sorry. So here again, we're still, even at the enterprise view, you still have to make sure that you've got a strategy to make sure you're answering the right questions. And here, starting to align what each of these teams is doing around whatever the enterprise strategy is going to be key here. And each one of these teams kind of has that domain knowledge within the enterprise. It's within the line of business itself. So you can leverage that in starting to build your enterprise strategy. I would say probably at this stage too, there's a larger emphasis on making sure that you're increasing your trust in AI, because as you go to an enterprise strategy, you want to make sure that everything that you do across the enterprises, there are best practices, and that you've got some guardrails in place, basically, so that you're not so that no one group is off kind of doing their own thing. All right. So while I'm here, I'm gonna just talk about the trust and risk kind of conundrum sometimes. And when you're working in business, or you're not, or you're the decision maker, or you're the AI practitioner, your goals are really quite often complementary. So a decision maker, or those people who have the duty to make sure that the business, that there's a decrease in risk, they're well, they have a duty to decrease the risk. And sometimes in the AI team, which is comprised of data scientists, they're focused on making sure that whatever model that they create is understandable, and that that people trust it, and that it's not going to cause harm. And so from an organizational perspective, risk is, making sure that you have a good understanding of what's involved in deploying a model. And that starts with asking questions. And, from a practitioner's perspective, when you are able to understand the model, you can start to actually speak the language of quantifying risks, that can speak to the decision makers, or like answer the decision makers' concerns. So, although it may seem like you might be talking a different language, you're actually not. But I'm going to point out that communication is critical here. And it's critical, as you go along throughout this journey too, because, if you're going to create a strategy, the best way to, be able to execute on that strategy is to communicate and get, buy-in and trust from the people that have to actually do the implementation on that strategy. I'm going to only spend like 1 second here. But, we're going to I'm just going to preview what H2O is specifically doing with responsible AI. Ingrid did mention in the last session, how much we're putting focus on building out our responsible AI practice. So, um, we've developed a set of, what you see here actually is a depiction of where we're putting our efforts to create what we are calling responsible AI. So there's a number of different concepts and applications, but these are the ones that you're going to see incorporated into the products that, we are putting out in our thought leadership. So if you want a deeper dive into this, then we do have module 6, which is devoted to responsible AI in the enterprise. And, it will go into depth of each one of these. But, basically under the umbrella, we have a number of different components. And so each one is going to deal with a different consideration with machine learning models, like explainability, interpretability, fairness, or the evaluation of bias, security, and then, how do users interact with the AI systems. And so each one of these is going to be supported by different techniques or algorithmic techniques that, are going to help build and increase trust in a model's predictions. And so, between the AI Foundations course and the Machine Learning Foundations course, you'll get to, understand from a theory perspective, as well as actually apply some of these tools to machine learning models. All right, so we're still talking about, how do we mature an organization. So I'm going to throw this out for responsible AI because I do believe it is very important that, this is a framework that we've put out for incorporating responsible AI into the model building process. So this is going to be a highly simplified workflow, but it demonstrates the importance of the inclusion of reviewing your model before you move, and then, when to move forward or to adjust your approach. So, here at the start of the model process, you're going to undergo loading the data and other data preparations. You're going to do data exploration, feature engineering, then you'll move on to model training and evaluation. And then, once you're ready to move along, then that's when you will do some sort of model review process for things like explainability, interpretability, and fairness. Now, it's important to note here that, bias is a critical issue that you have to deal with. So, if you look, there's a number of different places where there may be some data or statistical or some sort of human bias that can be introduced. So depending on how the data is collected, who's doing the collecting, how the data is entered or used, there's a chance that there's bias in this model, or bias in the data. And so a machine learning model can learn from that, can learn bias from that data, and then in turn make bias predictions. So this might occur unintentionally. You might be not even be aware of it, but tools like our responsible AI tools are something that you can use to help examine your model from a number of different perspectives and standards that can help you build trust and identify where maybe bias might be playing a role. But I'll leave you with a couple of questions that you might want to ask yourself as you're going about the model process. So, does the data you collect actually represent the all of the possible combinations of users and scenarios you're trying to model? Um, if it doesn't, then maybe you need to go back and collect more data, or change the scope of your project. Two, do you have enough data to adequately train your model? So if you're not representing all of the groups that you're trying to predict for in your model, then you're definitely going to bias it. So if the answer is no, then you should go back and do some sort of refinement. And in a data, excuse me. And so if I go back to this illustration, if your model fails that review, then you're going to go back and try again. And so, if it does pass it, then you're going to actually go back and you're going to go on and move to your deployment. And then from there, you're going to do a continuous ongoing review and monitoring process. So that might mean you collect additional data, create a new model, or sunset one that's inadequately performing over time. All right. I know we're running up on time and I've got like a couple of sections left. So do we have time for questions or no?
I think we should just try to get through it. I'll keep trying to answer the questions, and then maybe towards the end we can do a few more questions.
All right. All right. So the last stage is data driven, and this is where you're going to find the most mature organization. That's, and so this organization is, using data and insights to compete faster and more intelligently. The organization has a strategic vision and it's communicated, and, it's led to it is leading to widespread adoption and use of AI within the organization. And then, as the organization is growing and learning, AI best practices are, improved and adopted. Basically here, just to give you the short and sweet, now you've got an enterprise view of, or you've got an enterprise view of a structure, excuse me. So maybe you've got a chief data officer now, and your chief data officer and your chief technology officer are playing critical roles in, delivering on that enterprise strategy. And you've got a number of other support teams that are helping to move change along, because change is hard and it's, hard to do from an enterprise level. But, when you centralize and kind of create a strategy that people can execute on, it does make things easier, especially as you're talking about adopting a technology such as artificial intelligence or machine learning. So all this is basically saying is now we've got like a true enterprise view of what's happening, and you've got a really mature team that's supporting your architecture, so your data and technology architecture. And you've got a really solid governance strategy and team that will challenge your models and make sure that you're adhering to the enterprise standard. And this last one that I'll just talk about really quickly is that in this data-driven organization, all of the 5 keys that we talked about earlier are being used at a deep level. So you've got a data culture that's well-defined. You're collaborating with a diverse skill set. The business questions are top of mind, and the teams you work with are cross-functional. They're close with the business unit. There's an emphasis on communication and knowledge sharing, and your data and technology platforms are well considered and developed. And then trust in AI is baked into the process. Here, we're just looking to see that, once you start to see and understand AI more in this data-driven organization, this is where you're building out your competitive advantage based on your industry and your strengths. So you become a leader in this space. And we just see that a chief data officer basically is, allowing data to become an organizational asset. So, it's infused in the decision-making process, and, that helps to bring value to the company, whether that's, uncovering new opportunities or getting into new markets or creating new features in existing products, or improving the efficiency in some business operation. All right, and then the last thing I'll talk about is just a couple of quick tips for how to organize with artificial intelligence for success. So a couple of things that we've seen work well is establishing a self-service model for the business. So that means making sure your key AI talent, like your analysts or data scientists and developers, are aligned with your business needs. And so that's a callback to making sure you've got a good data culture and asking the right questions. Make AI consumable for different use cases or workloads. So, when you're building your AI platform, think about how elastic you need your service to be, or, undertake that data and technology assessment and create a bank of use cases that, and use that in a tool and use that in the decision making for what tools or technologies you're going to have available for the entire organization to use. And then building out the capability to have multiple lenses on the same data with specific views by teams, by team. And so you want to build your platform in a way that will account for things like different permissions or access to the same data, but for different purposes. And organizations that are successful, are going to maybe position AI as a part of some existing analytics organizations. So sometimes you don't have to start from scratch. And then if you're focusing on newer technologies, you can, attract other talent, and, maybe using a center of excellence approach will allow you to develop best practices and also collaborate with business teams, which are going to be critical to supplying the demand for the platforms that you're in, the analytic services that you're offering. And then the last thing is just to really think about, scale and the future state. So how can you modularize the architecture in a way that allows you to support a broad range of applications and analysis? So in the future, you can expand as you need to. All right, I'll just summarize really quickly that, these are the 4 phases of maturity for AI transformation: potential, operational, strategic, and data driven. And hopefully you saw that over the course of this hour, the 5 keys to unlocking AI are critical as you start to increase your maturity. And that, as you reach the ultimate level of maturity, your data becomes basically an organizational asset that can be turned into value. And the last point is basically that AI adoption improves when there's a clear strategy and, you've got your talent and your technology and your goals aligned. All right. And just to recap, our study group starts on Saturday. And then the Ask Me Anything is on Sunday. We have our next session on Monday, and then the second module starts on Tuesday. One quick thing, there are quizzes for sessions 1 and 2. The special session, there is no quiz for that one. But if you plan to obtain a badge, I would ask you, or, I would suggest that you take the quizzes now. You can take them at some later point, but, keep, while the information's fresh, take them. And here are just some resources. So there's some additional information about model ops and responsible AI and our AI glossary. So I think maybe I have time for one question.
So there's a question around the strategic and data-driven phase. And so they're just kind of asking about the roles and trying to understand the roles and the phases a little bit more. So I think the clear thing here is that, you're going to start with your own single project right? And kind of grow into repeating more of those into in the phase two with the operational phases. And then in that operational phase, you might be sort of still department oriented, or in some kind of AI innovation group. And then at some point, you're going to grow to a point where you need to start looking into enterprise. So that's your first step. Enterprise is three in strategic, right? And in four, in your data driven sort of phase, right? That's where you sort of like you're taking those final steps into into transforming your company into an AI company, right? So instead of kind of going, oh, well, I went enterprise wide in one step, we sort of we're going to go enterprise wide in sort of two steps.
Thanks, Raphael.
And the deck and the videos, they will be posted. You should see the slides and the videos for session one already in the course. And within about a day, we'll post the videos and the slides for this course.
Oh, yes, thanks. And I did promise that I would show you where to go if you wanted to attend the study group. So if you're in the training website and you're in module one for an AI transformation journey, if you come to contents, once I don't know how far in advance it is before this is activated, but um, once it's ready, once it's open, you just come here and click on it and then hit the button to attend. Hopefully that's the way it works. But this is where you would access the study group.
And it'll be open, I think, 30 minutes beforehand, just like the course.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Raphael. All right. Well, thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, folks. And hopefully we'll see some of you in the study group this weekend. Otherwise, we will continue with the next session on Monday. Have a good day or good evening. Bye-bye.